Chapter 16. A Photograph of 1999. To fight the day, Ethan first had to see it, and he discovered to his frustration that he barely could. This was the cruel paradox at the center of his whole mission. The death of his father was the most important event in either of his lives, the wound around which everything else was built, and it was also the event he remembered worst. Because he had been 7 when it happened. A 7-year-old does not file away the contractor's name, the address of the job site, the make of the truck, the stretch of road. A 7-year-old remembers being taken into a kitchen by a crying aunt. He remembers the casserole dishes. He remembers the particular silence of the apartment afterward, the way his mother's face had changed and never changed back. He remembers feeling, not facts. So when Ethan reached into his memory for the hard details he needed to fight the day where exactly, when exactly, how exactly, he came back with almost nothing. A wet morning. A road. A truck. A job his father should not have taken. The shape of a catastrophe, with all the load-bearing facts worn away by 37 years and the fog of a child's grief. It was not enough. You could not divert a river you could not locate. So he became, that year, a quiet miner of his own family's talk. The facts he lacked, he realized, were not lost, they were simply held in other heads. His parents knew the contractor's name. They spoke of him sometimes, a man named Vance who threw work David's way, friendly and a little careless. His parents knew the sights. He heard the addresses traded across the dinner table, the names of streets and developments. His parents knew the rhythms of the work, which jobs ran long, which crews cut corners, which roads David drove and when. All of it lived in the ordinary current of household conversation, and a quiet child underfoot could gather it, a grain at a time, and never be noticed doing it. So Ethan listened. He made himself a fixture in the rooms where his parents talked, playing on the floor, drawing his pictures, apparently absorbed, and underneath the play the cold river ran, catching every name, every place, every complaint about a long drive or a bad site or a careless crew, and filing them against the worn shape in his memory. Vance. He fixed the name. The developments out past the edge of the city, where the new houses were going up. The road that ran out to them, 2 lanes, no shoulder, bad in the rain. Piece by piece, over months, the worn shape of the day began to take on edges. He learned that Vance was the thread. The contractor who threw David the work, the man whose careless jobs ran long and whose crews drove tired down bad roads in bad weather. In the first life, it had been a Vance job that put David on that road on that morning. Cut the thread to Vance, and the road itself might never come. It was the cleanest line of attack, and it fit the first rule perfectly, early and small, a quiet steering of his father away from one careless man, made years in advance, long before any wet morning. Ethan began, gently, to plant the seeds of it. A child's vague dislike of the Vance man, dropped at the right moments. A small, steady pressure, banked with all the others, toward a future in which David Cole simply did less and less work for a careless contractor named Vance. By the end of his 6th year, he had assembled almost the whole photograph. He could see the day now, where before there had been only fog. A morning in the late winter of 1999, gray and wet. A Vance job out past the edge of the city. The 2-lane road with no shoulder, slick with rain. His father's truck, And somewhere on that road, in those 4 seconds, the other vehicle. And that was where the photograph still blurred. Because the one thing Ethan had never known, not as a 7-year-old and not now, was the nature of the thing that had actually killed his father. A truck, he thought. Something large, something that lost control or ran wide on the wet road. But whose? Going which way? At what hour? The collision itself, the precise mechanism of the 4 seconds, sat in the center of his photograph as a permanent gray smear, the one detail no amount of mining could recover, because no one had ever told the grieving boy, and the grieving boy had never thought to ask. It gnawed at him, because everything else he could fight with the first rule steered David off the Vance jobs, off that road, off that morning, years in advance, small and early and unseen. But if all of that failed, if the river's weight dragged his father onto that road anyway despite every nudge, then the last second save would come down to those 4 blurred seconds. And he would be trying to change a collision he could not see, fighting blind at the one moment he could least afford to. He filed the gap where he could not lose it. The mechanism of the day is unknown. Assume the worst. Build the early defenses deep enough that the day never comes, because if it comes, you will be fighting in the dark. That night he looked at the photograph he had built, the gray morning, the bad road, the careless man, the blurred and waiting center, and felt the size of what he was taking on settle over him fully for the first time in months. He was 6 years old. He had 3 years. He had an ember in his chest that grew by inches, a ledger of 4 names, a doctrine of 5 rules, and a photograph of the day his father would die with a hole burned in the middle of it. Against that, he had to bend the most weighted day in the river of his whole life, early and small and unseen, deeply enough that the blurred center never came to pass. It was almost nothing against the weight of the world. It always had been. But Ethan Cole had unbroken a teapot and smothered a fire before it caught, and grown a power that should not exist, and assembled a dead man's death out of a child's fog 1 grain at a time. He set the photograph beside the 5 rules and the 4 names and the cold ember, and did not despair. 3 years. He had 3 years to make the gray morning never come. He meant to use every day of them.